Welcome to Being There. And now that you're here, we're going to share our insights into exploring the worlds of music, poker, and life. I'm a professional poker player, personal coach, and television commentator for the Heartland Poker Tour. My name's Kenna James. Thanks for joining us.
Hey guys, I'm Blake Ian, musician, meditator, serial entrepreneur, and novice poker player.
So I'm going to reveal a very special technique that I use when I play poker. For those people that play poker out there, I think it's really powerful because it's kind of simple. And if you can be mindful of it, definitely will, transform your game. So think of it as a 4-point system. All right. So when you're in a hand of poker, there's 4 major aspects to the hand. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Here they are. And now let's say we're playing a tournament. Chips are primary. So if you have your opponent out chipped, that's 1 point.
Okay.
If you have a hand range advantage, let's say your opponent's playing any ace and you've got like ace 10 in this particular situation, you have a hand range advantage. Yeah.
So you say hand range advantage as far as my range is higher than yours?
My hand is higher than your range. So let's say, for example,
okay.
Yeah, let's say you're in the small blind and I'm raising 30% of hands from the button, which is any ace, any pair, any Broadway suited connectors 5 or above. That's 30%, right?
Okay.
But you have a hand like ace jack. So you have a range advantage. That particular hand versus my range is got a higher equity value.
Got it.
So you have hand range advantage. Point number 2. Okay. Third is table positional advantage. So like in this example, I said I'm on the button with 30%, you're in the small blind, but I have table position, right? So that whoever's last to act in the hand, that's point 3.
Okay.
And then the 4th point is the betting advantage. Whoever has the last aggressive action has a significant advantage. So if I raise and you just call, I have the advantage. If I raise and you 3-bet and I call, you have the advantage in the betting. That you are said to have the lead going into the next betting round. Okay.
So those are the 4 points.
So the 4 points are
they in order as far as priority?
Yes, kind of, but it depends on what game you're playing. If you're playing cash or tournaments, chips are more important in tournaments, whereas your hand value or your hand advantage is more important in a cash game. So, I would say they are chips, table position, hand, and betting. So think of those 4. So now let's say we're in a hand. And like I said, I raise on the button, right? And I have more chips than you do.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a hand like ace-8 suited and you really want to play.
So you've got every point against me, basically.
So you decide to call. You got it. If you just call there, I've got table position, I've got chips, I've got the betting lead, and hand range advantage might be about nil in that spot. So it's 3-0 to 1. So you haven't set yourself up for success. So you want to set yourself up for success in which that you have an advantage of maybe 3 out of 4 of those. Or if you can get 4 out of 4, that's great. So sometimes you get in these spots where the hand range is really close, it's null. So really what swings it is the betting lead, or the table position or the amount of chips. So if you can focus and think of those 4 areas of the game when you're deciding whether or not to play a hand, obviously when you have nothing, you don't play, or when you have a great hand, you're going to play. But, a lot of times when you have king, queen, ace, jack, ace 10, ace 9 suited, 2 6s, all these kind of hands, you're wondering, should I really get involved here? Then you can go to this point system and really kind of evaluate the value of your situation a little bit clearer and a little bit more quickly. And so you set yourself up going in, pre-flop, like, should I take the lead? Should I take the betting lead here or not? Well, if I don't, I'm going to be at a 1 to 3 disadvantage already throughout this hand and a you know,
Right.
and I probably should just, you know, rather than press or try and chase, just go ahead and get out.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. So things I can check or not check, I can look into for assess when I'm playing a hand. Like I pick up
You got-
2 8s, but you have better position. You have twice as many chips, and let's say you're playing a pretty tight range. I'm gonna fold. I'm right. I mean,
well, but
no. If you've, I'm saying if you've raised,
it depends.
if you've raised.
Well, if I raise, then you got, yeah, but you know, well, that situation is a little different because it depends on how many chips you actually do have. This is not going to cover all situations because you might just flat there for set value as long as you have enough chips, right?
Right.
So there's other factors.
But then, it's not only pre-flop too, obviously, right? You can apply these to every street.
You
right?
can apply, right? It's just the four main factors. There's other factors in a hand, like the playability of your hand. Like pairs, the small pairs tend to play really easily, so you can take more of a disadvantage. Like when you're going for set value, you know, I'm going to try and flop a set or get out.
I gotta tell you why I'm laughing. I really wanted to do this joke to fuck you up right now, but I couldn't do it because it made me laugh too hard. I was gonna go. All right.
Hey guys, this is what we do. By the way, this is how we do it. And spiritually, this is what happens when you get charged and just laugh hysterically. But that's what the show is. It's not just all fun and games. It's a lot of serious talk. Thanks for joining us. We're going to step away for just a minute. Hey, let's spin this record and listen to some music while I go get a slice of pizza and a beer, eh?
It's gonna be us someday. No, we'll never give up, and we'll never give in, 'cause we're only getting older. Hair is only getting thin. Too many last minute changes to what and who we are. And we see all the other people who go beyond that far and hold on to our dreams of where we want to be. Believe in me and what I have to say, that there's gonna be us, it's gonna be us someday. That's gonna be us someday. We had a vision to be on a stage in front of thousands of people of a brand new age.
Enjoy these few spinners. Nick is gonna spin it up.
Oh, if I look a little red right now, it's I just had a coughing fit. We were off the air for a second, but we're back. Thanks for hanging with us. Let's continue.
So, okay, so better example, I have ace nine and you have me in position and you make a bet and you have twice as many chips. Really no reason for me to play that hand.
You got it. But let's say it's.
But if I had double chips than you and you were earlier than me betting and I had twice as many chips as you, that changes everything, right? Because now I've got position on you, I've got chip position.
Yeah, now instead of flatting, you're going to 3-bet with your ace nine. So now you have table position, you have chip position. Now you have betting position. So you're trying to gain an advantage in every position. You see?
Yeah.
So now you because in that situation he raised. Let's say he raised, yeah, but he raised in middle position, and you're after him with ace nine. You got twice as many chips. So now you have table position. Hand range is about nil, or maybe you're at a little disadvantage, but you got a 3-to-1 advantage. You can easily take less of a hand. Matter of fact, you could have 8-5 suited in that spot, and you're ahead of three of the four areas.
And 3-bet?
Yeah, for sure.
Just to give yourself an extra point of those. So that's really interesting, because to me, everything else you said, I understand, but the taking that advantage, I guess what it is like the other advantages, the other points, I guess, are seem like a choice seem like not a choice. They seem they've given to me. Like at that point, I have double your chips, so I have half your chips. That's just a definite. It's nothing I'm doing at that moment in that hand. Table position, same thing. Hand range, kind of the same thing. But with that taking the advantage, that's like I'm basically buying that point out of the 4 points, right? I'm putting money in. You're buying, purchasing that point. So that's interesting, because it wouldn't seem, it doesn't seem intuitive for me to do that. But obviously, I always trust your opinion.
That's right, which is why poker, the advantage goes to the aggressor, right? So, for example, let's say you do have somewhat of a hand, ace 10, and I 3-bet you with 8-5, and I'm ahead of 3 of the 4 areas. See, you still have to kind of hit your hand, because let's say it comes king jack 4. You check, I bet my positional advantage. What are you going to do with your ace 10?
Right.
You see?
Well, right.
Or it comes queen 10-3. You check, I bet, you call. It's like a tennis match. I'm working you around the court. You know what I mean?
Right. You're playing offense, not defense.
Correct. And that's 25% of one of those key 4 factors. A lot of people just default into playing passively, check calling, trying to make hands, trying to see flops, and
well, I told someone
they give up that edge.
I told a buddy of mine about you and about some of the work we've done together on my poker game. And I told him, we were talking about adjustments in life, and we always talk about obviously how poker and life are very, sort of microcosm. Poker's a microcosm for life. So it came up and I said, it's funny. Sometimes you just make these adjustments and things just, really, they have this serious effect, this serious result. And I told him the story when I was in Puerto Rico with my family, and you called me just randomly, and I said, I'm going to go play a poker tournament tonight at the casino. Just give me a nugget of advice. And you said, you're not allowed to call tonight at all for this whole tournament. You sort of it reminded me of Rocky, where he ties his left arm or ties his right arm, and so makes him switch. And you just took away calling. You said, you're not going to make one call. You're going to fold, bet, or raise. Those are your only moves for the whole tournament. Just do it as an exercise. I took the tournament down that night, and I didn't make one call. And it was it was like 45, 50 people, and I went in there and I won the tournament. And it was obviously a lot of factors, and I was fortunate in card stuff. But I mean, it was pretty awesome, because there was that one adjustment that changed things.
Cool.
And we've spoken recently about adjustments too. Making small adjustments, kind of closing certain doors and other ones open, and leaving space for for the right things to come in means, sort of closing spaces that don't serve you. And we've both been going through that in a lot of different ways in the last few years. And so we've kind of related on that point. And it reminds me of a poker game. It reminds me of poker philosophy because of those adjustments, and if you're just playing any two cards, you're sort of, you're not like really.
Well, yeah, that would be like me just going on the keyboard and just pounding notes, right? It's just
right.
like
you might get lucky, right? Like a monkey might pound on the keyboard and write some good melody at some point, right? If you do that with a billion, but it's not, it's certainly not the most efficient or effective way for results.
No, quality is about rejection. You know what I mean? And if you throw enough hands away and you have the discipline and patience to do that, the ones you're going to play are going to be naturally of higher value. It's kind of like you probably have 1,000 more songs you haven't released, right? And then the ones you really cultivated and worked on are of that much higher quality because you've selected,
I'd say there's 5 to 10 songs per song that I release. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. What's interesting about that is that means you're selecting about 20% or less of the songs that you compose or work on, and that's exactly what it's in poker.
Yeah,
about
10 to 20.
In a 9-handed, 10-handed poker, about 10 to 20% of hands, that we play.
That's awesome.
Because the rest is there's a lot of junk, and then there's the premium hands, which are obvious, are always money winners. But really, what makes the difference between the winners and losers is how they play the middle ground. How they play, when they're not definitely in front and they're not sure they're behind. They're kind of, I'm in front of some hands, but behind others, and that's where you got to kind of think of these 4 factors. And the other 5th factor, which I didn't talk about, there's many factors, but without getting to it, is the playability. Like, how easy does this hand play? Is it a hand that can make easily second best? Is it a hand that I can get in trouble with? So anyway, think about those points when you play again, before you take your action, and count the points before you take your action, and it'll think, wait a minute, just by taking this one little action, I can get a 3-to-1 advantage. Or if I just call here, I'm going to be at a 1-to-3 disadvantage. I might as well just, wait for a better spot.
Well, we stepped away from one a couple minutes. It's been a couple days, but we're back live to tape, obviously. As Blake wanted to go off and try this system out to see if it really worked. What are you laughing about, my friend?
You said we're back live, and then you're like, well, actually, we're not live.
Well, we're live to tape.
Right, my bad.
I mean, otherwise, I guess we'd be dead, right? Which is why we have the spiritual part of the show. Blake actually believes we are all dead. Nobody's really alive. It's all the Matrix. But that's another show. On this show, we're talking poker. This episode, I guess, not this show. What's been happening out there on the felt, my friend?
Well, I've put your 4-point system to the test and brought it into my game, and the results, I have to say, are pretty miraculous, pretty as promised, transforming of the game for me. Not only in the results, but in the way that I see the game. I mean, I can't tell you. There's probably, and you've given me a lot of poker tips over the years, a lot of coaching sessions. I've never received any advice or system like this that has had a greater effect on my game and the ability to see what's going on during the hand. It's just opened up a grid, and I experienced that with guitar. All of a sudden you just see more, you're just at a newer level, and chess, you kind of get that. And I really experienced that in the past week with poker from your system. I mean, just everything became a lot clearer. I got a lot of clarity in the game. So just to remind people, those points of position that you explained to me in a 4-point system of being, and I'll recite them just to test me to see if I know them.
Okay, good. Yeah.
If I remember them correctly. Obviously, these are Kenna's points. 1, table position. 2, chip position. 3, hand range position, meaning if I feel like I'm playing at a tighter range than the opponent. and betting position, which would be me taking the lead on the betting. Is that correct? Do I have that right?
In general, you have it correct. A couple of corrections, meaning a hand advantage. Do you have an advantage? Meaning, is your hand ahead of your opponent's range? What does that mean? That means that if he's playing this range, and then you plug in your hand, you can use a software program for that. I use Poker Cruncher, for example, and you can see your equity, what the value of that hand is worth versus his range. For example, let's say a guy's playing aces and you have 7 deuce. You might have 9% equity, which means if you run all 5 cards out, you're going to win 9% of the time. You don't have an advantage, you're at an extreme disadvantage, right?
So it's interesting because this is one of my questions that you dove right into is, the way I had interpreted it when we spoke last time is that it's my hand that obviously it's not a range because I know what hand I'm holding. Let's say I'm holding ace king, right? Versus the range or the frequency that I could, based on the frequency, the range that I could guess the opponent's playing, and I want to put my hand against their range. One of my questions was, let's say this guy just sat down and I don't have a read on their range. Is it then just the likelihood that my hand beats, most hands? Like if I'm holding ace king or aces, do I automatically give myself that point if I'm holding aces, basically?
What you give it yourself is you have what's called a baseline or default range that you would give just an unknown opponent raising from that position. For example, if they're raising an early position, we give them a 10% range, in middle position 20%, and around back 30%. And then you would compare your hand to that range. As such, let me show you here. So this simulation has run that hand versus this range 6.7 million times.
Wow.
And you're going to come out ahead, again, if all 5 cards are seen, 63% of the time versus 36. So this gives the difference between your equity and his equity is what's called your edge. So you can see you have almost a 30% edge here. You see?
So that's where I would award myself that point.
That's correct. I'm ahead of his range. But let's say you have a hand like Jack 8 suited. And he's playing that 30% range. You see, he's a 60-40. People like Jack 8 suited, but you're actually a 20% dog. He has a 20% edge on you. So as far as hand, you're behind his range.
Got it.
So this is an app. Later, when we get into some more poker discussions, I'll teach you how to use this and how to determine what kind of advantage you have.
Got it.
Your hand has versus a range.
So two questions I'm going to ask at the same time in case they're related, but if they're not related answers, we can split them up. But one is, does this 4-point system work on all streets, or is this just a pre-flop strategy? And the second question is, what about the players behind you who haven't acted yet? How do you take that into consideration in this point system? Is it just the people who have acted already?
Oh, great questions. All right, let me take them in reverse order. What about the players that are left to act? Well, yes, that's another factor. It's not plugged into this system. But yeah, do I look to my left and think, are they going to play or not? But that's kind of like seeing a road that you're not on yet. Meaning all decisions are made in new units of time or in the time that you're making them. A lot of people get tripped up because, well, what if he does this? Or what if this person does this behind me? Or what if he has a hand? And they're worried about what's going to happen in the future, and it affects their present time decision.
It's interesting.
So we give it some consideration generally, but not to where it overly affects our present time decision. For example,
I think a lot of people would be surprised to learn. I'm surprised to hear that. Obviously, I trust and believe what you're saying. It's surprising because in games like chess, the whole thing is about seeing 12 moves ahead. How many moves ahead you could look at,
right?
For advantage. But it's interesting that in poker you want to really stay in the present and not go too far into the future of what could happen.
Yeah, not really more than one street ahead, because you get too far in front and too many. There's so many millions of computations that come up. I mean, the basic concept of poker is you play very few hands up front, a few more in the middle, and most of your hands around back.
Right.
So those concepts are built into that question already.
Got it.
Now, your other question about can you use this throughout the play of the hand? Of course, but it's more set up to use of whether or not to get engaged in a hand in the first place.
Right. That's how it felt. It felt like a pre-flop. I started to realize when I put it into practice, I was like, oh, this seems like it makes a ton of sense pre-flop, but as we went down to flop and all these other streets, I was a little thinking, I was a little confused as to whether I should be using it at that point, because there were a lot more factors. Right.
Well, I have another one that I'm going to give you called PFHS, which is pre-flop hand summary, a system that I designed for summarizing the action of the importance of the action pre-flop. So when you're post-flop, you're mentally clear on what to do. So I'll share that in another episode.
All right, Kenna, that was another great show. Thanks for having this set up, and thanks everybody for joining us. I'm Blake Ian.
And I'm Kenna James. Join us next time as we continue to explore music, poker, and life. Thanks, everyone, for being there.
Been a long time. Yeah, it's been a long road. And I put in my mind.